Hey guys, my name is Dylan, and today we're going to be running through Color Finale 2 Pro, which is an incredible plugin for Final Cut Pro that allows you to create some professional-looking color grades. This will be fairly in-depth, so if you feel confident in any area and you want to skip it, I've left chapter markers so you can navigate easier. At the very end of going through everything that you can do in this plugin, I'll be showing you how to create a commercial look with Color Finale, so stick around till the end of the video. Okay, so press the shortcut Command 5 to open your effects window. Find Color Finale Pro and double-click. This Corrections tab will always show up open, but for now, I'm going to close it to go over the sections in the plugin. We have 5 sections: Color Management, Corrections, Image Analysis, Color Chart, and Film Emulation. Corrections is what you'll use the most, but the rest can come in handy. Let's start with Color Management. If the color profile you shot in was something other than a log profile, you'll leave it on Assume Video. If you shot in log, which I recommend you do if your camera has that option, you have a couple options to choose from. With Assume Log, Color Finale will analyze your footage and guess how much contrast and saturation to add to your shot to convert it to a Rec. 709 color space. This is useful, but not as accurate as clicking Use Input LUT and selecting your specific camera manufacturer log to Rec. 709 technical LUT. Like I've mentioned in some of my previous color grading videos, you can usually download these LUTs for free on your camera manufacturer's website. So if you're shooting in log, I'd recommend doing so. I don't know enough about the ACES color space to comfortably teach you about it, but from the research I did, it is essentially another color space like Rec. 709, except it is newer, more suited for our digital cameras nowadays that can capture significantly more colors, and apparently helps with the consistency of colors across different sources. This is something I'm going to learn more about in the coming weeks, so I'll keep you posted. And if you know a lot about ACES color space and you have the time, just shoot a quick comment below talking about it. So once your shot is converted to the correct color space, your Corrections tab will come into play. If you watch my video on my favorite features of the plugin, I showed you how quickly you can get a standard look for your image just by using this panel and not even opening up your layers. Most of it is self-explanatory. Exposure raises or lowers the overall brightness of your image. For auto exposure, if you use something like a gray card, you can select that to get close to an accurate exposure. Usually, I just use your exposure slider or your color wheels because this thing can be inaccurate depending on what luma values you choose. If you shot in a log profile and you still need to add contrast, just get your shot's overall exposure to about center on your luma waveform. And if you don't know how to use this, watch the video I made about scopes. I will put that link in the description. They're so important, and I know you guys would benefit from it if you don't know much about them. So right about there is a well-exposed image. Next, we'll add some contrast. And pivot, and something to note is that pivot can only be used if you add contrast. Pivot essentially moves the contrast to a brighter point or a darker point by pulling from the midtones. This is helpful to make minute adjustments to help expose skin well and still keep good contrast. For white balance, we can click Auto, which I wouldn't always recommend. You'll see here it doesn't really know what it's doing, but if we use this picker and select an area that's white or gray, we can balance our shot's colors correctly. We can use this RGB value chart that pops up to find a good selection. So you want to find a place that generally shows even levels of red, green, and blue. You'll see that selecting his skin won't work, but finding something that's white or gray will show those values sitting closer to each other. So we'll click this white paint, and boom! That looks pretty nice. Now you don't have to use auto or the picker. You can simply drag the temperature slider and the tint slider to adjust. The temperature slider will make your shot warmer and cooler essentially. So let me undo here and I will bring up my RGB overlay to basically show you how to color correct. This part right here on the RGB overlay is this bright white part in the shot. This should be white. And looking at the RGB overlay, red is rising above the rest. If I just swing this temperature slider to the left, boom, done. Now we've color corrected our shot. Tint will adjust the amount of green and magenta in the shot. This was fine as is though, so I'll leave it. Saturation obviously is the intensity of color in your image. And as for the plugin's sharpening, it is real quality sharpening. It's really awesome. Final Cut sharpening sucks, so this is quite an improvement. If you're just wanting to bust out footage with a standard Rec. 709 look, this section should work and help you to get it done quickly. But the magic of this plugin lies in this layers panel, and hopefully after you watch this video, you'll feel more comfortable with using it. Watch the whole thing though. I know it's long, but you won't regret it. Let me skip going in depth on the layers panel for now, just to explain these last few things. Recent presets is the same thing that FCP offers. Saved presets for your color grades. So if you make a grade, you can save all the layers and adjustments you made, so you can just click that preset for other clips. But weirdly, I actually haven't been able to get it to work. I sent a question into Color Finale about it recently, so I'll let you know what they say. This is a cool feature. Sync will basically sync all the clips you have in a group together, so if any changes are made to one clip, it will affect all of them. This is so helpful if you end up making changes to your grade later, so you don't have to delete all of the effects in different clips and then reapply the new adjustments. Let me show you real quick. I'll create a group and just name it Example. I'll make sure that the other clips that I want to have the same grade are clicked as in that group. Click Update Effect. If I go to a clip and make a random adjustment just to show you, you'll see that the adjustment affected all of the clips. If you're like me and you're never done tweaking clips, this feature may come in handy. Maybe you know that in Final Cut, if we want to copy effects on a clip and paste them to another one, we press Command-C and Command-Shift-V. In Color Finale, we just press copy and paste on any other applied Color Finale on a clip. It'll even work across different projects. Paste Special allows you to choose what you copy over. Okay, so let me close the Corrections tab for now. Next up is Image Analysis. False color shows us the exposure levels of our image. If you see red, your image is overexposed. That is a no-no. The darker parts of the image are going to show up as purples and blues, and the brighter parts are going to show up as yellow and orange. That's easy to remember, right? Bright colors mean bright, and dark colors mean dark. The main use of this will be to see if your subject's skin is the right exposure. If it's too bright or too dark, basically. As a general rule, skin should be pink, light gray, green, and/or dark gray. It depends on the complexion of the person's skin. Remember, skin tones fall in the mid-tones, so that's what this range represents. If you see your subject's skin is too much of a color it shouldn't be, you know that you'll need to adjust your exposure. Isolate takes away that pain of cropping in or creating a draw mask on your subject's skin to check that their color and exposure is accurate. Just click Isolate in an option like Ellipse to check quickly. If you don't know how to use this vector scope, this line is where your subject's skin should lie. So here, it appears we're a little off. I'll go to my mid-tone slider since skin tones are mid-tones, and swing the color wheel until the skin is on the line. Like I said, we'll go over these wheels in a second. Color chart is going to be useful if you have a color chart to help you balance your colors. I don't own one, I need to get one, but I have this pic from DSLR Video Shooter to show you. Click whatever chart you have, so for this it is the Passport. Once you do that, you'll click these four corners on the chart, line up your colors, and press Match Chart. This will color correct your shot for you. If you have multiple shots in the same scene, you can save that color chart correction as a preset so you can balance the rest of your shots quickly. Last up, we have Film Emulation. This adds some pretty quality film grain to your shot with the click of a button. So amount is how much grain shows up. Size is how big the particles are. Film response, I think, is how much it shows in your footage. I would just leave this at 0. Color variation adds some color for kind of a TV effect, if that's the look you're going for. And then grain rate changes how fast the grain moves. And then we have our standard preset option if you want to use the same adjustments you made to this across different clips. In my opinion, you'll just need to adjust the first two sliders 9 times out of 10. Okay, here it is, the moment you've been waiting for. In the Corrections tab, Layers panel! No need to be afraid, peeps, let's dominate it. I'll try and break it down in an easy way to understand. So we have 6 Corrections tabs here. These 4 are the most important: Color Wheels, Color Curves, 6 Vectors, and HSL Curves. The 2 added in their newest update are Shuffle and Filter. Remember, with color grading, either you're adjusting the color in your shot, the saturation in your shot, or the brightness in your shot. That's what all of these do, except in different ways. Filter doesn't deal with that, but we'll go over that in a bit. So open up your color wheels first. These 3 sections give us options to change what I just mentioned. the hue, which is color, saturation, which is the intensity of color, and luma, which is the exposure of our shot. Unlike Final Cut, which has the wheels labeled as shadows, midtones, and highlights, these are labeled lift, gamma, and gain. This may be a dumb example, but this is how you can think of it. Think of lift as being so shadowy and dark that you want to be lifted out of darkness. And you can think of gain as you gaining brightness in only the brightest parts of your beautiful image. Not the greatest example, but I hope that'll help you remember them now. This will add or subtract different colors in those 3 exposure values by just moving it around to different colors. So we can add more blue in our shadows by pulling down in the lift, and add more red in our highlights by raising up to red in the gain. Saturation is adding more intense color in those luma values. And these master sliders here adjust the exposure of your shadows, midtones, and highlights, or lift, gamma, and gain. This isn't all that important, but there are 2 things I wish the Color Finale did with these wheels. First, I wish they put the exposure slider on the right and the saturation slider on the left, because that's how it is in Final Cut's color wheels. And the second thing I wish they did is added color to the saturation slider so you know it affects color. I like how in FCP's wheels you can tell what those sliders do just by looking at them. No saturation, saturation. Nevertheless, it says it here, and it's not really that big of a deal. This saturation slider controls the intensity of color in the whole image. You have the option to change these wheels to sliders, but I would just use the color wheels. If you make an adjustment, you can reset it by hovering over the name and pressing reset, or resetting all 3 wheels by pressing reset all. And don't worry about these RGB values. You can't change them, only reset them, and all that does is essentially move your wheel slider a little. I'm going to show you a quick example of how to use these wheels a little later on, so don't click off, but for now, I want to make sure you understand what the other sections do so you feel comfortable with using them. This next tab is the color curves, and if you watch my color grading tutorials, you know I love my curves. The only difference with these curves and Final Cut's curves is that they don't give you the multitude of color options that FCP's curves offer. I emailed the people at Color Finale and let them know that that's something to consider for the next update though. So with the curves, you have the highlights at the top, the midtones, and the shadows at the bottom here. By pushing up on the curve, you're pushing more of that color into the shot. So here I am pushing more red into the highlights of the shot and decreasing the red in the shadows by making a slight S-curve. This master curve adjusts the brightness of the image, but with these options, you can also affect the saturation of the RGB values. So setting it to master in RGB will allow you to adjust the brightness and add contrast, but this also affects the overall saturation of your image since it is the master. We can see that by looking at our vector scope. Our shot is becoming more saturated just by adjusting this master curve. There are 2 other options we can choose from. If you set it to Luma in RGB, making adjustments to this Luma curve affects only your brightness and not your saturation of the different colors. But with this, you can also end up adjusting the brightness of your shot by pulling down or up on the RGB curves. Luma preserving is easy to remember because the name says it all. The Luma values or brightness is preserved. So the brightness can be saved while the RGB values are adjusted. This option is what Final Cut's curves do naturally. Once again, you can reset these curves by hovering over and pressing reset. 6 vectors is a really simple and easy way to make adjustments to specific colors. They give you 6 options to choose from, and you can change the color of the color you choose, the intensity of that color, and the brightness of that color. The nice thing about these is that skin generally lies in this first red color, so adjustments can easily be made to skin. For example, I can use the image analysis isolation mask to identify that my subject's skin is off color, use the red vector, and hue adjustment to get that skin color back on track. Quick and easy. It's also fun to play around with changing different colors of things in your shot. The next section are the HSL curves. Hue versus hue allows you to change the color of whatever color you choose. Hue versus sat allows you to change the saturation of whatever color you choose. Hue versus luma allows you to change the brightness of whatever color you choose. Yes, it's just like 6 vectors, but you have more flexibility and you can make the adjustments a lot more gradual. As a quick explanation, I will change the color of this grass here. So go to hue versus hue so we can change the color of the green in all this greenery. Click this color picker, select the green, and because this makes too fine of a selection, I'm going to widen the colors it picks up. I'll add 2 points a little wider by pressing Command and clicking. And I'll delete these 2 inner points. You can actually select a point or multiple points by just dragging and selecting. You can use this to move the points too, which is handy. It really helps speed things up. If I don't change these outer points to linear, it won't anchor these points and the adjustment will be made a little to the other colors. So I'll need to change to linear either by right-clicking or clicking the linear button on this side panel. That smooth control point does come in handy though. As an example, I'll go to my Sat versus Luma curve where I can take out the saturation in different brightness values. I can get rid of the saturation from the darkest areas by selecting the darkest circle here, adding another point by pressing Command and right-clicking, changing this to linear so it locks down, and changing this to smooth. Now it'll make a nice gradual decrease in saturation in the darkest parts of our image. This side panel Luma value selection area is really helpful and something which I'll show you how to use in my future color grading tutorials, more focused on the color grading process. In their newest update, one of the things they added was this section called Shuffle. This tab is a trip. To be honest, I don't foresee myself using this much though, but maybe you will. It gives you the ability to make some creative color decisions easily. I just find that they're just a little bit too out there. It could be cool for music videos though. The only combo I found that I like that works with some shots is switching the blue channel to green. It gives sort of a light teal and orange look with certain shots. The last section is called Filter, and this has options for blur and for sharpening. This will usually be used in tandem with the masking features of the plugin. So take this shot. Say I want to give it a shallower depth of field by adding some blur. I'll click the mask button down here. I'll click the mask button again here. And since this is the perfect shot and angle to show a fake macro tight focus, I'll use the rectangle to create a mask that will make it look like a narrow plane of focus. I'll adjust it and feather it, and then track the clip by pressing this right arrow track button. Like I mentioned in my previous video about the plugin, it is not crazy fast, but oh well. While this is tracking, let me explain some things. You won't have to worry about this section. Tracking will take care of the position and rotation for the most part, so forget about this. By changing the display to a composite mask, you can see what will be affected when you make adjustments. So this is showing that when we add blur, anything under the white part will be blurred. Remember that. White is what will be affected. Since we don't want his eye to be blurry, we'll press invert. This just flips the mask. If we choose this other display option, you'll see that it gives us a preview of our shot, and whatever has pink on it is what will be affected by any changes we make. So let's press the mask button again, and we will make changes to the part of the shot that was just covered with pink. Disc blur is aimed to look the most like out of focus blur, so I'll select that and adjust. Pretty cool, right? The same goes for sharpening. So if I want to sharpen her eyes, mask button. I'll use an ellipse shape to create circles over her eyes and track. Because her hair was in the way on this other eye, I'm going to start where the eye can be fully seen and track forward. Then I'll go back to that point and track backwards. If I need to stop the track and adjust the mask, I can. I'll add a bit of feathering on both of these masks. You can see if we choose one of the other display options that we will be affecting her eyes and nothing else, so this is good. That's what we want. Click the mask button again and adjust the sharpening to taste. Since I showed you some of the shape masks and how to use them, let me introduce the other masks. Just a note, you can use all of these masks on any one of these sections: color wheels, curves, shuffle, etc. And if you're still unsure about what a mask does, it allows you to make adjustments to specific sections of your clip. I think the best way for me to explain this is to show you an example real quick. Let's pretend we want to make this pizza pop more, both in contrast and saturation, but we don't want it to affect the rest of the shot like it would if we just adjusted the exposure and the saturation in the color wheels. So press the mask button and I will quickly run through the rest of these. This option gives you a very gradual adjustment to the mask. It's a gradient mask, essentially. You can see what I mean here. It makes a soft, gradual adjustment with a straight line that is feathered. These two allow you to draw the mask around whatever you want. The B-spline path gives you a path that's smooth and wavy, and the Bezier path is like your linear draw mask, just straight lines. Something that's odd about the plugin, and maybe I'm just doing it wrong, when you press the Bezier mask, it creates a small line, and then it doesn't allow you to press any points to make a mask. You have to go to the Bezier button up here and click it to actually make a Bezier mask. Could be a bug in the plugin, but it's probably a user error on my part. Now with this mask, as far as I know, it allows you to select luma values, so dark and light parts of your image. So if I swing this to the right, you'll see that only the bright parts of my image are being selected. A feature you can find in both this mask option and this next HSL mask is this blur slider. And to be honest, this right here is worth the cost of the plugin. Let me show you why. I'm going to make a crazy adjustment here, and you'll notice that we're starting to see artifacts pop up. This is something that would happen when you would push colors too much when using the HSL masks in Final Cut's native color grading tools. But watch this. Look at that. A simple blur can help to blend those colors that are breaking apart to make them appear buttery smooth. Looks like they were actually meant to be next to each other. This is what made me so excited about the plugin, and this is one of the things that can help you to make your grades look more professional. Last, but definitely not least, this mask option allows you to select specific hues, saturation values, and luma values to create a mask. Like I just mentioned, this is something that's in Final Cut's native color grading arsenal, but it doesn't have the blur option. So as an example, I'll select the color picker and select the red of the tomato sauce. Let's use the mask input display to see what we're doing. If you remember, hue is color. So we want to work with this and try and get a good selection here. Now let's play with saturation. Too much and we'll get the hands, so let's leave that out. And last one is luma, which are the brightness values. Whenever you're creating a mask from an HSL mask, just play around with it. You'll find out what works by trial and error. Let's give it a 2% blur, not too much. I'll invert it so the adjustment is made to anything outside of that tomato sauce. And just as an example, I'll decrease the saturation a lot. The nice thing about Color Finale's new update is we can group and exclude parts of masks by creating other masks together. So here, I'll get rid of this tomato sauce to the right because it is distracting and not the focus of the shot. I'll add an ellipse mask, fit it over the bowl, and track it. Maybe I don't want this desaturating adjustment to affect the bowl at all. So basically, I want to leave it natural and untouched. I'll click Subtract to take it out of the mask adjustment and add a bit of feathering. If I change the mask to Composite Mask, you'll see what is affected. Remember, anything that's white in the mask will be adjusted when you use the wheels, curves, etc. Now, if you know you'll be making adjustments to not only the inside of the mask, but also the outside, let me show you how to go about doing that. First, create a group by pressing this button that looks like a folder and add 2 color wheels, or whatever correction you'll be using. For one of them, right-click and click Invert Parent Mask. So you can understand this better, I'll rename them Outside Mask and Inside Mask by right-clicking and hitting Rename. This feature of renaming and grouping is so helpful to stay organized and knowing what correction is what. After this, I'll select the group and create a mask on the whole group. Now you can make adjustments to the outside and the inside of the mask by going into each color wheel respectively. That brings us to the final few things, and then I'll tie everything together by showing you how to get the commercial look with this plugin. So don't click off, because I know you guys will enjoy that. Down here we have the mix, which is available on most adjustments and layers in Color Finale, and it just lets you change how much of an adjustment you want to play a role in your shot. Basically, it's the opacity of those layers and adjustments. This gives you all of the blend modes that you have in Final Cut, and these can actually come in handy when you're trying to get different looks. For example, here, if I select soft light and then reduce the mix, I now have an image with high contrast where our red pizza pops. Cool, right? This folder here allows you to quickly make groups like we did earlier, and this folder lets you see every LUT you have on your hard drive and on your computer automatically. Yes, these show up automatically and are organized. You don't have to search folders or anything. Not only that, it shows you what that LUT would look like on your footage. I know what you're thinking, and the answer is yes, you should definitely buy the plugin right now. Okay, so let me take you through grading this clip. I'm going to skip this basic area since I think the majority of you have that down. So generally, the first thing you do is make sure your clip is converted to a Rec. 709 color space if you shot in a log profile. For this shot, I'm going to manually convert this to Rec. 709, but I could use Assume Log since I don't really know what camera this was shot with, so I don't really have an input LUT for it. So I'll open my layers and bring up my color wheels. I'll raise the exposure in my gain and lower my lift a little bit, making sure not to go above 100 IRE or below 0 IRE on the Luma waveform. I'll add some saturation back into my image, and I'll label this correction Contrast Sat. After converting to Rec. 709 and adding contrast and saturation, you'll color correct your shot if need be. Let's use our white balance picker and select the white of her towel. Looking pretty good there. You'll notice on our RGB overlay that our blue is oversaturating in our highlights, and we can see that by bringing up our range check by going to View and heading down to Range Check. We're not overexposed because if we look at our Luma waveform, it's showing we're okay, but we do have too much color in the brightest parts of our shot. We'll take care of that later. First, let's check to make sure our subject's skin is accurate. Exposure looks good, and skin color is okay, but it is a little off. We'll take care of that in a second. After color correction, we'll start with creating the look. So let's pretend this is a toothpaste commercial. That means bright and punchy. Commercials are normally very saturated and have high contrast, and they make you want to feel like their life is way better because of that product. One way they do that is through lively colors and contrast. So let's create a group and add 2 color wheels in it. One will be for our background mask and one will be for her. I'll invert one of these and label them so we stay organized. I'll rename this group and press the mask button. Let's use the HSL mask. I'll click the picker and select her skin. Let's fine tune it. I'll add a bit of that magical blur and let's start adjusting. Let's go to the outside mask and we'll start to introduce some teal and some blue into the shot. We'll go with a complementary color look. 2 colors opposite on the color wheel that contrast each other and help each other pop. Here it'll be the orange color of her skin that pops with our background teal. And maybe just a little darker blue for the shadows by adjusting the lift wheel. For her skin, let's make sure the color is accurate and on the skin tone line. Isolate, ellipse, and since skin tones are midtones, I'll move the gamma wheel so her skin lines up with the skin tone line on the vector scope. So there's our look. Let's do some secondary corrections now. The cherries on top. I'll make her a bit brighter and give her more contrast by adding a color curves and creating a vignette by using a shape mask. This will help to make her more of a focus in the shot. I'll feather it a bunch and track. Once that's done, I'll go back into the curves and raise the overall brightness inside the mask and create contrast by lowering the shadows a bit. So basically creating a slight S-curve. Because I don't want to increase saturation, I'll change this to Luma and RGB. The reason I'm choosing this over Luma preserving is because I'm not going to be adjusting the RGB curves, so I don't have to worry about them affecting the brightness. Because her towel is so bright, I kind of want to help motivate that by shaping some light above her. I'll add another curves, add a mask, and this time use the edge mask. Then I will raise the exposure by using the Luma curve and just bring the whole thing up by pulling from my midtones. Now let's take care of our overly saturated highlights and shadows. I'll bring up the HSL curves, go to Sat versus Luma, select the darkest circle, and lower the saturation. And I'll select the brightest circle and lower the saturation. If I take off range check so the zebras go away, you can see what an adjustment that makes. When color grading, if your blacks are black, your whites are white, and your skin is accurate, you can get away with quite a lot. Final steps here, I'm going to make it punchier since we're going for a commercial look. So let's open 6 vectors, and I'm going to add a bit more saturation into her skin by going into the red vector and adjusting saturation, and I'll add some brightening as well. I'll head to the teal vector and let's make her stand out even more by lowering the brightness of this color so it adds more contrast with her skin, and then add a bit more saturation for more oomph. I may actually decrease the saturation on this blue tau color a little. Final adjustment, because I'm not liking that very faint tint of blue I see in her hair. I'll open a color wheels and push my lift wheel away from the teal. That's because her hair lies in the shadows. And that is a slight adjustment, but it makes a difference. And because this is a commercial look and I want her skin to look magnifique, I'll add a cool plugin called Beauty Box. This is a plugin by Digital Anarchy, and all this does is find the exact color of a person's skin and intelligently smooth it over. In the past, I made a tutorial about how to do this for free, but there really is no comparing that free technique with this plugin. Look at that. So, in review, we added contrast and saturation. Then we color corrected slightly, but that's not shown in the layers here. We added our stylized look. We shaped our light and helped guide our eyes into our subject and helped the scene to appear more happy and lively. We took out the saturation from the brightest parts of our image and the darkest. We helped really define our look by using 6 vectors and making her skin more saturated and brighter, and lowering brightness and raising saturation in our teal color. Last thing we did, we pushed away from the teal with our lift color wheel to get our hair looking a little more natural. And then we threw on Beauty Box. And boom, I think we are commercial ready. What do you think? And that is my in-depth run-through on Color Finale, and if you have not picked it up yet, do that when you can. I promise you won't regret it. I'll leave a link down below you can use to pick it up. Stay tuned because I'm going to be doing a lot more color grading tutorials with this plugin, so make sure you subscribe if you haven't already, and press the notification button so you can get notified when I post those. If you have found anything useful in this video, help me out by pressing the thumbs up button and leave a comment below. I put a lot of time into these videos, so support is always appreciated. Have a great week, guys, and I will see you in the next one.